I'm here at useR 2014 at UCLA, and I'm having a conversation with Dirk. Hi, Dirk. So here we are at useR. Could you tell me a little bit about what it is that you hope to get out of these conferences when you come here?
They've changed. They've changed because they've gotten much bigger. R has taken off. They draw a lot more people. I had the good luck to be able to attend many of these. I think I was at the first few and then started missing the last few that were in Europe because of travel, but they provided a very good intimate atmosphere to connect with people you knew otherwise from interchanges over the internet. And connecting face to face is good. It's a little harder now with 700 people. The conference is so big and successful than it was when there were 100, 150 to 100, but it's good. It's mostly just connecting, catching up, and yeah, it helps. Meeting people often leads to subsequent collaboration on things.
Yeah, mixing of ideas. The community is so broad that there's so many people from different pockets. So you've been using R for quite a while, is that correct?
Right, since the 90s.
Can you talk to me a little bit about your journey in R and basically how you started and really what you focused on?
Yeah, I came across the S language relatively early as a graduate student, but didn't have access to it. There was an early book by on non-parametric regression by Hartley, who's now prof in Berlin, which had code snippets in S, which I didn't know but could read, and C, which I knew and used, and that was always quite intriguing. And then with the advent of Linux that I started using relatively early in the mid-90s too, I knew that this R project was starting and doing this, so I looked at some early versions, the 06 series of R, 09, those releases, and started shifting some of my work around, and quite frankly I found it a bit challenging at the beginning. The language has a different paradigm from the ones that I'd used. But you work at it, and the potential was so obvious. I mean, it was behind in terms of usability in my field of work, which is finance, which is analyzing financial data. But we all, as the community, worked and created tools, and it then surpassed S+, the commercial implementation of the S language, and now R it is. And we've been doing well. It's been a fantastic journey. I mean, I helped it along a little in finance. We're now running a conference in Chicago every year and have been doing that for 6 years. So it's been good. But it was a slow and careful transition because I needed to get at ease and get better at it. I mean, the first attempts, of course, were hard, and I do what everybody else does. I mean, I read the documentation, I scratch my head, and that was in the pre-Google days. It was much harder to get immediate answers to your questions.
Remember when you used to have to know things?
Yes. It's terrible.
So you actually said you knew C and you came to R. My background's computer science and computer programming. What is your background?
Half of that. I did industrial engineering, so I always did that, but for use in econ and finance.
So when you come from a traditional computer programming background, R is striking.
Yes. And I came from Europe, so when people tried to stretch ComSci a little bit back then in the day and talked AI, there was either a Lisp camp or a Prolog camp. Given where I was in the Prolog camp because I was for a while also in the south of France, so I was briefly attached to one of those Prolog research projects. I hadn't seen these languages with the umpteen parentheses, so R was different. So, but you come to terms with functional programming and the influences, and then tend to appreciate the strengths. It's a good mix.
I think so too. I think there's a lot of beautiful things about it. So the R also is interesting because the community, as we said, it's a real diverse, interesting community. There's, there's the biostatisticians, there's the people who are just focused on modeling, and you're really focused, like you said, you have a lot of focus in finance. Can you talk to me a little bit about R's role in finance?
Yes, I mean R in a way reflects sort of the broader open source community, and in some ways it's different. So I mean there's different actors and players and different interest groups and people working on different subject matter. But I had always aimed to work as a quantitative analyst in finance, which I then did. So I wanted to work with data, with programming, with strong enough tools, C, C++, Unix, and with data-centric enough things. So R clearly looked very, very promising, and I used it. And the industry as a whole has been a very large net importer of open source technologies. I mean, my first job was straight up with one of the Wall Street players, and there was open source there everywhere, even in the mid to late 90s. Yes, because no licensing. You can just take it in, use it, have source, adapt it, and you're not in the business of selling software. So the real or perceived difficulties of open source licenses don't apply when the service that you render to clients is not comprised of giving them software, so that you're bound by the redistribution of source code. So that was huge, and in a way that always gave a little bit of an impetus to sort of give something back and do something, because it had helped me so greatly professionally that I didn't mind helping to push the cart along the road a little.
Speaking of giving back, you're one of those community members that has really given back a great deal. I mean, you're involved in the Debian project, I believe.
Right.
And I'm a huge Linux user, and you've also done some stuff to help interface R to higher performance environments. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was out of curiosity and work need. I mean, the high performance computing stuff came at a time when in order to solve larger problems, you had to connect several computers rather than just getting a bigger computer with many more cores. Life's easier now these days. We don't have to do that anymore. And I was in a workplace where I inherited a couple of servers that were trading machines that weren't used anymore, so they were powerful enough, and then I just put a distributed computing framework on them and started noodling around with that. Made some notes to myself. The notes became some slides. I started talking about it, and then people liked it, and I talked some more, and that became some tutorials at some of these useR conferences in the past.
And you've also worked to integrate R with the C++ programming language. Which the C++ programming language is also just its own giant environment with, you can have 5 C++ programmers who are expert programmers, and they'll program 5 different subsets of the language to a great degree. Can you talk to me a little bit about your experience in sort of melding together C++ and R?
The point that you made is a good one, but it also applies to R. Languages that are successful and versatile enough offer different paradigms, and different users can pick different styles. So that's the same in both. But it's also true that no one single tool is the best for all tasks, so often you have to mix and match. John Chambers alluded to that in his keynote 2 days ago. And yeah, that's in a way that's always been sort of the Unix mantra of combining multiple tools to get a larger job done. So it was always clear that it would be useful to extend R with some other tools. And for me, that arose literally out of a, well, can we do this? What if test? There was a very early, for its time, really forward-looking and out there quantitative finance library that I wanted to connect to R, and sort of Rcpp in a way became a consequence of that, because we needed something like that in that project. It grew out of it, and then of course the way it sometimes goes, it became much bigger, and just more recently I got back to updating the other project with newer Rcpp features. So it's good. It's a pretty natural fit. So I sort of got lucky because I started working on something that inherently sort of made sense, and that's why it worked, and that's why it helped people, and that's why I got help from other people who wanted to work with it. So it's been good. It's been gratifying. I mean, John Chambers pointed that out to us when we visited him in Palo Alto in 2010. That it's really that was a long-term vision. Multiple languages fitting together, exchanging sort of whole objects, things with rich attributes and full structure.
Yeah, I saw a post recently talking about important CRAN modules, and Rcpp was really near the top, and I started to think about that, and it really is. It's because it is this fantastic bridge to this large existing pool of code that was not preconceived as being a client in R, but now because of this fantastic bridge, you really, and it's what John Chambers talked about, it's an interface. You really helped clean up that interface.
Right. And the underlying plumbing was there. It's just that R was created in '93, got pushed significantly throughout the 90s, and at that time C++ wasn't as widely usable. There were a few things that were available in commercial compilers, but the free compilers lagged a little, so everybody worked in C. That's just the way it is. But because C++ extends C naturally, one can use these interfaces and then work on them. And C++ in particular allows to automate some of these data transfer things. So in a way, we're just providing sort of a nicer, smoother passage from the one system to the other, and that seems to resonate with people. So now it's widely used, and that's really gratifying.
No, I'm using it right now just to integrate to an image processing library that I use. That is a very high performance image processing library. So it resonated with me.
Right.
I believe I saw also on CRAN that you have either contributed to or developed a bridge to redis.
Yep.
So I'm actually really interested in your perception of this. So everybody talks about big data,
right?
And I like asking people how they define big data.
Right.
Do you have a definition of big data?
Well, I mean, there's the usual flippant jokes. That's if it no longer fits into Excel, it's big data. No, I mean, different people have different notions of it. The redis thing is a fun one because we all profit greatly from the work that Brian Lewis has done with many packages, but among them are redis. So he already has given us one that works fantastically and covers basically all of redis in R. I just had a particular need where I wanted to get irregular time series stored in redis and get them back more quickly. And someone else had taken Rcpp and tried to connect to redis using an existing C library. I'd helped them a little. We had a basic framework of a package, and then I just used that to make sort of one simple use case that I needed a lot faster. And that's one component of a package that's otherwise still relatively small and nascent, and may grow into something. But that's a more recent project, and that's just sort of, how shall I put this, sort of extend as needed. It's not meant to replace RRedis, because RRedis does many things, but there was a particular use case where an operation took, 400, 500 milliseconds, and I knew I would rather want this done in 20, because what we were doing, we were accessing data, we were plotting them, via these new and nice things, shiny, and I wanted the perception of the refreshment to be quicker. When the user sees that this is slow, users disengage.
Absolutely.
And users, I mean myself now. I'm impatient and I want this to update more quickly. I want to switch to another series and kind of figure, this sort of stings. It's slow. This is not much work to make it faster, so we just made it faster. There wasn't that much to it. And it's a nice little story. So I wrapped it up, gave a recent talk on it. It's a package, it's there. And these things then just sit there. And sometimes they get picked up and other people come and push the cart further down the road. That's the nice thing about open source. Doesn't happen with everything you do, but sure. If it's of interest to others, and if it's offered in a way that it makes collaboration easy. If they can read your code, if it's clear how and where to extend it, how to build it, then people sometimes actually do, and that's awesome, because you give something in and you get something back that's bigger than what you put in.
Yeah.
And it works that way more often than not.
That's kind of the
Rcpp is the poster child of that. It does now things that I never envisioned it doing. It's great. It's good.
So let's switch topics a little bit and talk about the R language itself.
Yes.
So coming from a traditional computer science background, R was a little terrifying at first. There was things I didn't understand. The fact that aspects of it are genuinely meant to be used interactively. That's really confusing when you come from the standard model of computing. Is there any one feature of R or two features of R that you just point at and go, this is it. This is one of those killer features that I'm so thankful for? That's actually almost highly embarrassing, that after 14, 15 years of that, I would not be the person you would turn to get good, pristine definitions of scoping rules, lazy evaluations, how they're used to best advantage. I tend to work more with code added to R, say compiled language extensions, than doing terribly clever things on the language itself, where the language allows you to compute on itself. So I'm not taking that great, I'm not pushing that to its fullest potential, possibly, just because it's the non-Lisp or scheme programmer in me that still seems to be a little bit more foreign. But it's this thing, you can pick your pockets and get things done and not use every single feature.
Implicitly, of course, I use that all the time because that's what other people do to implement key features in the language. I mean, it's just you have a choice of whether expressions get evaluated immediately or a little later, and that helps in implementation and design detail. But that's more on the R side, and what I've done in packages on the R coding side is actually is more pedestrian relative to the other side. So in that sense, I've probably acted more as a systems integrator than as someone who's pushed the R language itself a lot further.
So, you've been on this journey with R now for a while.
Right.
If somehow magically we have a time machine and we're able to go back and you're able to have a conversation with you when you began this journey, is there a bit of advice that you would give yourself about, R, how you're going to treat it as a systems integrator, really anything in particular?
Floss more regularly? No. It's hard because you don't have foresight. I think we've been very lucky and we've gotten very far. Could we have gotten here if we'd planned it? Well, by the mere fact that we're here, yes. But it's just, sometimes you don't always take the straightest and closest route, and you don't quite know where it gets you. I think there have not been too many setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
R is a really funny project, and there's some things that ultimately sort of need addressing. It's governed a little different from other open source projects. I don't really have any beans with that. The thing that has been really tremendous is how well the package ecosystem worked, which is something that our core team members put together and that we all take advantage of. That's been very open to contributions and is just rock solid. I mean, people sometimes question other scripting languages how the packaging system should work better. Ours actually really does work, and the language team does a great job abstracting sort of underlying issues like the operating system, the environment away, and it just behaves uniformly on the platforms that matter to people. Macs, Windows, Linux, other Unix versions where they still exist. So
are there still other Unix versions?
Well, we have this ongoing joke that one of the CRAN maintainers always keeps us honest with respect to Solaris, and we always joke that he's the remaining Solaris user on the planet. We do that all for him. I mean, it's probably not quite that bad, but it's a bit like that compared to where it was 10, 15 years ago.
No,
yes.
absolutely.
Yes, I mean, Linux is one, and that's not a bad thing.
No, it's nice. So turning the question around slightly, there's going to be people watching this video that are just now starting their journey in 2014. You've got a great deal of experience. Is there an atom of advice, a kernel of advice that you'd give somebody who is today wanting to get involved, wanting to learn, wanting to become one of the people who really has, fluidity in these tools?
Floss regularly. It's hard. I mean, it's just you fall into cliches relatively quickly, be passionate or whatever. I mean, it's just the end of the day, you gotta be driven. There has to be something that you want to solve, and if you want to make a change, then you probably want to solve something that hasn't been solved before. But I mean, at the end of the day, I got very lucky because I happen to have been interested in areas where change was happening, and then I got even luckier that I got involved in making some change happen. That's good, but in hindsight, I couldn't really have planned that. I mean, you have to be ready, you have to keep at it. I mean, you have to put some work in, so earning some karma points helped. And you mentioned the Debian stuff. I mean, what helped here actually was that I just facilitated R for a very long time by looking after its integration in Debian. First together with Doug Bates, then taking over from him. And so people knew me, and I only started writing code for R, releasing packages later, and I started sort of with small ones, apart from this, what then became the C++ integration. I mean, there were sort of some really small things. Sort of token example is, I have another package that's much smaller, that's actually relatively widely used, that was just meant to solve one particular problem. I needed to fingerprint time series so that I knew whether they had changed or not. You do this with hash sums. R had a function that took strings and allowed you to just run a checksum over it, so I just put in MD5 SHA, sort of the usual algorithms that are all there, wrapped that up, and then it turned out that a lot of people needed something like that to know whether they could memorize objects that were cached or whether they had to, redo them. And then it turns out that, things like Nitter and the various plotting frameworks, whatever, they all use that now. So the package also has a relatively high usage rate, but it started at something this tiny, and I just had 3 hash functions in there. But now I think we probably have 8 or 9, and different people contributed other ones or contributed different use patterns. And the beginning, I just did it over memory. Then someone computed, oh, you may as well do that over file, and it's super additive in that way. So you got to be lucky, pick some pockets where work needs to be done rather than where it's already done. So in that sense, I don't know. I mean, a lot of the people now come up and, hey, what do you think about Julia? And I think in a way, my younger self would probably have turned to Julia now, but for me, it's not that attractive because I have a decade and a half, maybe 12, 14 year investment in R, where I know things now, I know how to do them, they're paying off, and there's no real incentive for me now to leave that behind and turn to something else. So, I'm getting things done rather well enough with R and C++, so that's why that's the tool for me. But for someone young, I mean, just go somewhere where you can learn some and maybe contribute some. But something like that, you can't really plan that from the outset. It's just sometimes it falls into place and sometimes it doesn't.
On another note, so you run an R conference yourself.
With 5 friends in Chicago, right.
You are one of the people that runs an R conference, and it's finance, if I
right.
Can you tell me a little bit about that conference?
Right. Yes, I was clearly influenced by the early useR conference and the few DSCs that I've been to, but there were a few of us who were getting together because we knew of each other, that we were in the same place, and we were in the same in the field, sort of vertical stack, if you wish, and that hadn't been done yet. And I think we first met in 2004, 2005, and thought, yeah, this should really be done. And then one among us is a graduate of one of the local universities there and had still good contacts, so we approached them and kind of said, yeah, let's do this, and then we just tried it, and that was good timing once again, which helped, good timing and a bit of luck, because I was really just breaking out into finance. I think we had a bit under 200 people in the first year, and then we pretty rapidly got to 300 every year, so it's about the same crowd. That's a capacity cap that we have, which we haven't hit hard, but it's approaching that, and that's it's a really nice set, because we run single track rather than with the parallel tracks here, so you don't miss any talks, but you have enough sort of hallway conversation with other people, and it's good to meet and exchange ideas. And that's sort of a funny bit too, because people are very protective of their ideas, of the intellectual property. I mean, that's how the industry makes money, but we cooperate on things that are sort of common plumbing, connection to databases. It's the Redis thing that I talked about Redis at useR, and that's been good. Cool. But it's just, that was just happenstance, and people have not really replicated this in New York or London. There were some people who were trying to take it to New York, which is obviously a target for finance. There was, before our first conference, there was a one-day event at Columbia, but nothing more. And then a friend in in London, England, who had come a few times to ours, has sort of copied and cloned the idea and now does the same for R in insurance. And I think his conference is up again next week or sort of something like that. So he's running with a very similar idea.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to discuss that we haven't hit?
No, I think that was a very nice, pleasant and fruitful discussion. Thanks for the very focused questions.
Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.